Good evening, welcome to the program. Well, the shockwaves from Barry O'Farrell's sudden resignation this week as New South Wales Premier will be being felt right around the country. Politicians everywhere will be making sure they've done the right thing when it comes to their dealing with lobbyists, businesses trying to win lucrative government contracts. Many have argued that the role of ICAC, the Independent Commission Against Corruption in New South Wales, that it's become far too powerful, but it has shone a light on this often dark area of how business and politics intersect, the role of donations, fundraising and lobbying along with it on both the Labor and Liberal side, at least in New South Wales. Is it time we had a federal body like this, a federal ICAC? The Greens certainly think so. To look at this and beyond this, the other big issues of the week as the leaks continue ahead of the budget next month and the decision on Badgerys Creek as well. We're joined tonight by Liberal Senator Fierravanti-Wells, Rowan Dean, a columnist with the Australian Financial Review and editor of Spectator. Tim Ayres is the New South Wales Secretary of the AMWU, and Labor Senator Doug Cameron, the Shadow Minister for Human Services. Welcome to you all. Good. Let's start though with New South Wales and with Barry O'Farrell's resignation. Was it necessary? Concetta Fierravanti-Wells?
I think Barry did the responsible and honourable thing.
And the right thing?
And the right thing. I've known Barry since 1978. We were at university together, and I think Barry had set himself a high standard, and according to that high standard, he resigned. But what I think has been very good has now been the transition, that within 24 hours we've had a very smooth and very peaceful and very orderly transition of
Which in the New South Wales Liberal division, which isn't always known for peace and unity, is somewhat remarkable. But sticking with Barry O'Farrell, Rowan Dean, do you agree that it was the right thing for him to go?
No, I don't. No, I think it's the whole thing is a complete fiasco. ICAC looked dreadful out of what's happened. A guy loses his job for no reason, no corruption, forgetting to put something on the correct register, which he could easily have done after the event. Okay, he was either very stupid or very reckless or very silly, but he didn't deserve to lose his job.
But how is that ICAC's fault though?
Well, OK, Jeff Kennett has come out and said it, entrapment. It looks like entrapment. It smells like entrapment. If he wasn't entrapped by ICAC, he was entrapped by other forces, working in the background, setting this thing up. It is too perfect a checkmate
just to break this down,
just be coincidental.
Just to break that down, though. So ICAC, who are investigating, Nick DiGirolamo, who I'm sure all would agree deserves to be investigated from what we know, they're looking at the dealings of Australian Water Holdings, and they come across a donation he made to a freshly elected Premier who is trying to win a big contract, $1 billion contract with. He's donated a $3,000 bottle of wine. What were ICAC meant to do? They've got to investigate.
Sure, they investigated. But, you know, let's just imagine if Craig Thompson had been the one with the bottle of wine. We would have found out that the vintage cellar card had been stolen. There would have been, from that side of politics, there would have been a million excuses. Barry O'Farrell could have done all that ducking and weaving and weasel words. He didn't. He told the truth as he saw it, and he's lost his job. But that is wrong, and the people
just sticking with ICAC, your criticism of ICAC, you agree they had to investigate this?
Yes.
So what then are they meant to do? If they are meant to investigate this bottle of wine, what have they done wrong?
Full disclosure beforehand that they had that note, if they had it beforehand.
Well, they say they didn't get it until yesterday morning.
And if not, then the system of ICAC is wrong, because in due legal process that could never have happened, therefore it is wrong.
But if they didn't get that note, as they say, until yesterday morning, what are they meant to do?
As I said, obviously ICAC is not working properly because that would not stand up in a court of law. We are going to see at the end of this the fact that there was no disclosure of that beforehand. We are going to see at the end of this, Eddie Obeid will get off scot-free, Ian McDonald will get off scot-free. The people of New South Wales will be infuriated that the villains, the alleged villains, are walking away scot-free while a decent, honourable man has lost his job. The people of New South Wales won't tolerate it.
The people will be outraged if they get away scot-free. It's not a prosecuting body, though, ICAC. That's for the courts.
Exactly.
Tim Ayres, let me ask you, back on Barry O'Farrell, did he have to go, and does that set the bar far too high?
Well, he had no choice. The way that he dealt with the questions on the first day of his appearances at ICAC was high-handed, unbelievable. The idea that you could forget somebody giving you a $3,000 bottle of wine is totally inexplicable to everybody. The real story here, I think, is the close world, the intersection between business and politics over what is a billion-dollar deal, and the effort that the lobbying community put into hanging around key decision makers in the New South Wales Liberal government, almost the moment that they took office. The new Premier has got a big job to do to clean all of this up. And
well, and
I
he's
think,
flagged that he will be making some announcements.
There's much more to come. You can see one of the Connie said that it's a big display of unity. Well, what is clear out of this is that the original leaking came out of the New South Wales Liberal Party.
Leaking of what?
Leaking of the details of the purchase of the wine.
Well, you don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know
That's
that.
certainly the speculation that's
speculation
coming out of there, and there's a long way to go in this story
Doug
for
Cameron,
the federal and state libs.
We should remind people that you were called as a witness before ICAC. Never accused or found, of course, of any corrupt activity, but this was...
Can't be found corrupt if you're not accused.
No, exactly. Or part of the investigation into Ian McDonald. As someone, though, who's gone through that process, how do you view the situation around Barry O'Farrell?
Oh, look, first of all, let me have the same chance as everyone else. You know, the Barry O'Farrell argument at ICAC doesn't pass the laugh test.
But he can't remember the one.
Well, it doesn't pass the laugh test. So he had to go. He had no option. You know, ICAC is a tough place to be, even as a witness, I must say.
Sorry, just on that, he had to go because you think he lied?
Well, there are some people speculating that he lied. There are some people, we heard tonight that it had to be stupid. He had to be stupid or he lied.
Right.
No one else has argued that he's stupid. I haven't heard anyone say that Barry O'Farrell is stupid. So where does that lead you? That there is, it doesn't pass the laugh test, that he can't remember a $3,500 bottle of wine. And let me say this as well. You know, people say, oh, it's only a bottle of wine. It's $3,500 from a company that couldn't pay its tax, from a company that was paying massive amounts of money out to try and influence politicians. And Barry O'Farrell went there and was unequivocal about his position. And I agree with Tim. His arrogance on the first day soon turned to ashes.
Well, and I think you were making the point off air that if it was $3,000 cash in a brown bag, it might be a bit different to how this is being treated as a bottle of wine.
Because most ordinary people would think, $3,500. A lot of workers would have to work a month to get $3,500.
Why would someone like Nick DiGirolamo be making a gift like that? Let's cut to the chase. Is he really giving a gift to a newly elected Premier?
Obviously to make an impression, obviously.
Exactly.
And that happens in business the whole time. That is how business operates. The point is that Doug and Tim refuse to acknowledge is that he did nothing wrong. He didn't. He wasn't influenced to give AWH anything.
Yes, he
didn't.
did.
He did not. And also, just to your point,
But let me tell you what he did wrong. Let me tell you what he did wrong.
Yeah.
He misled ICAC, and under oath, he ran an argument that doesn't pass the laugh test.
We know that, but he has not been found corrupt. You just said that you can't be found corrupt at ICAC if you haven't been accused of being corrupt. Barry O'Farrell hasn't been. No, but to the eyes of the public, that is how it looks.
Let's deal with reality.
That is how it
In reality, he's not been found corrupt.
Exactly, and yet he has lost his job. So ICAC doesn't work.
Does that mean he's done nothing? Does that mean he's done nothing
doesn't
wrong?
Work.
No corruption, but did he do something wrong?
Yes, he accepted a bottle of wine that was bought essentially with public money. He accepted a very expensive bottle of wine from a lobbyist. Like, if that doesn't send alarm signals to a person...
If he had declared it, that would have been...
Perfectly okay.
But his
sin was not being arrogant. You're saying his sin was being arrogant. I think if we look at politicians, there's plenty of arrogant politicians. His sin was not putting that bottle of wine on the registry,
Isn't his sin misleading ICAC? Now, do you believe he could have forgotten about that wine?
Of course he could have. As I said, he was either reckless. I didn't just say stupid. I said reckless in in being absolutely definitive that he couldn't remember it. Okay, so he couldn't remember it. Any other politician would have weaseled around, as I said, your Craig Thompsons and all that lot would have ducked and weaved and come up with all sorts
argument.
No,
all
sorts of no.
He's not a hero. I know he's a bit of an icon in the Liberal Party, and he's fallen from grace.
That's the difference. Their job, and the people of New South Wales know he does not deserve to be found guilty by this kangaroo court.
Do you accept that? And do you accept that a politician could forget a gift like that?
Look, lots of things happen in a very, very fast political world. The reality is here that the Premier the former Premier set a particular standard for himself, and according to that standard, he felt that it was appropriate for him to go. And I believe that he did the right thing and the noble thing for the New South Wales government that he was leading.
Because there's
that's really what it comes down to. That's from, I believe, the personal perspective. The broader issue as you have said, is the interaction between the lobbyist and politicians.
And do you see a problem there?
Well, particularly where that lobbyist is from the same political party as the government that he or she is seeking to influence. And that's really where I think that the new Premier, Mike Baird, hopefully will be heading.
What can you do about this, though? Because, you know, on the one hand, you don't want to get into a situation where politicians, ministers can't meet with business, can't meet with even lobbyists. Surely that should be allowed to happen. But is it the transaction of any donation to a party or gift to an individual?
Well, it's actually very straightforward. The ICAC released a set of recommendations. The O'Farrell government didn't implement all of the recommendations that came out of the ICAC. Some of those went to those transparency issues. Some of them went to declaring which meetings have occurred. A whole range of transparency recommendations that would have made a big difference.
Which
the
are some
leader
of the things
New South Wales
that
opposition
John Robertson's
has put that and more on the table. Barry O'Farrell should have adopted all of those recommendations.
This is essentially
it does make you wonder why he didn't.
The Daily Diary should be public. So, you know, I met this person and that person and this person, and we talked about this and this and this. Should it go that far?
It shouldn't need to. What is interesting is that this is a kind of hangover, literally. Tony Abbott came out when he was elected and said, you know, OK, from now on within the Liberal Party, you can't be a power broker and you can't be a lobbyist, you can be one or t'other. This guy was both, and we're going back in a period of time when that distinction had not been made. The point is that Barry O'Farrell was not influenced by that bottle of wine in any shape or form.
How do you know?
So ICAC were investigating because the AWH didn't get the contract. That's
not it.
Hang on, they didn't get the $1 billion contract. They got a $100 million
from Sydney Water.
Contract from Sydney Water. And there is the suggestion that the finance minister was there when Nick DiGirolamo was called in, and felt
like a schoolboy.
Felt like a schoolboy, in his words, at the cosy relationship.
Yeah.
But they didn't get the $1 billion contract.
Yeah. And can you imagine if they did now?
Yeah. But ICAC are not investigating that. And the argument was put forward, I think, very coherently this morning, that ICAC went beyond their brief, because their brief is to investigate AWH and its dealings with Eddie Obeid and that whole thing. They've asked... They have said there is nothing corrupt that Barry O'Farrell has done.
Exactly. But
they
to return
have
to
said
this,
that.
So this bottle of wine, the donation comes up, are they just meant to discard that when the Premier appears to give evidence?
Jeff Kennett has said, in his opinion, he thinks it's entrapment. It certainly looks like entrapment.
A lawyer now,
it certainly looks like entrapment when you have such a perfect checkmate, which would not stand up in a court. Which would not stand up in a court of law, Doug.
Don't you agree, though?
Precisely, so he shouldn't have to go.
There would be outrage if suddenly ICAC, when a red flag comes up about, hello, a bottle of Grange, 3,000 donated to the Premier, and ICAC say we're not going to ask about it.
Of course they should have asked about it, but it can't work that you can lose your job, you can be labelled, in effect, in the public eye as corrupt.
Well,
in the same way that Nick Greiner was, in the same way that Nick Greiner lost...
You don't go under oath. You don't go under oath to ICAC
so it was a mistake.
And mislead
But
ICAC.
let's look at the bigger picture. We now have two terrific Liberal premiers who have lost their jobs through ICAC.
Opinion.
Yes.
That's your opinion.
And They have been, one of them was found after the event to have done nothing corrupt. So ICAC has the power to destroy very good people on both sides of
That's
politics.
royal commissions. And
has
who puts all the
zero
royal commissions
ability
in?
to get the baddies.
So
It hasn't got one prosecution, ICAC,
But
not
you
one.
could do much better than that. Imagine if
Not one.
Imagine if Barry O'Farrell had declined to resign. Imagine the pressure that the New South Wales Liberal Party would be under today. It's
still under pressure.
Absolutely. He had no choice but to resign. The problem for the New South Wales Liberal Party is that they're confronting week after week after week of investigations in ICAC. None of that's going to end very well for them.
Let me ask you, Doug Cameron, as I said earlier, you've been through the witness box there. Do you have any criticism of the way it operates?
Look, I think the public expect there to be a strong body there. There's lawyers who have indicated, who look at these things, have said the rules of evidence are pretty tough, but that's royal commissions. The coalition royal commissions are used for political purposes.
No, but I'm talking about ICAC here. And do you believe their powers are too strong, that the rules of evidence are too lax? That you can, as we've seen with Barry O'Farrell, drip of evidence?
I think there'll be plenty of lawyers would tell you there are problems with the rules of evidence. I think any politician at the moment who says that ICAC should be wound up or run the line there that you shouldn't have people fronting up to ICAC if there is any suspicion has got no political currency.
I agree that's
Absolutely
the politically
none.
safe thing to say, but you're someone known for saying what you really think.
That's what I really think. I think any politician who argues now that ICAC, should be done away with, would have
Not done
no
away with,
credibility.
but has its power gone too far?
Look, I don't think so. I want to see people that are corrupt in jail. And the argument that ICAC has failed because maybe Ian MacDonald won't go to jail or anyone else won't go to jail just doesn't understand how ICAC works. They're an investigative body.
Yes.
They don't run.
But we're talking about the public, and if they don't get prosecuted, the public will go off ICAC like you cannot believe when they've lost a good premier and the bad guys doesn't go to jail.
Isn't that the prosecutor's fault? It's the prosecutor's fault.
He's got to look at that.
But you have to
It's not
go
ICAC's
back.
job to jail them, it's to investigate.
But you have to go back to the objectives of ICAC. Yes. And the objectives of ICAC are to investigate allegations of corruption, but also to investigate and ensure accountability in relation to dealings with public officials and public authorities. That's the objective. That's the objective of ICAC, and that's the reason why it was set up in 1988. And so, looking at those objectives, I believe that ICAC has met those objectives. And let's face it, had it not been for ICAC, a light would not have been shone on Labor's Eddie Obeid.
Would you agree with that, Rowan?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the reality. And so...
they're yet to go through the courts, but they wouldn't even be near the courts without ICAC.
Well, not strictly true. I mean, Kate McClymont and others at Sydney Morning Herald have done a fantastic job shining that light before ICAC began. So the press were doing their job, which is, this is the role of the press to shine a light, by the way.
But the press doesn't have anywhere near the power of ICAC.
Yes, if ICAC doesn't have the power to see people...
I can't get Nick DiGirolamo to sit at this table and answer questions, can I?
No. But if Eddie Obeid is not prosecuted, if no one is prosecuted out of the ICAC process, it doesn't work. If there are people whose reputations who are not found corrupt are losing their jobs. It doesn't work.
New South Wales is a far better place because of the operation of the ICAC. You remember the political culture in New South Wales in the 1980s. There has been progress made. The standard has raised.
So do we need a federal ICAC? Let's talk about that. Do we need a federal body like this?
I think the pressure for there to be an oversight body in the federal government and the federal public services engagement with these issues is going to be overwhelming.
Doug Cameron?
In the coming years.
Well, we've already got oversight on public servants. I was on the ACLE committee.
What about politicians?
And my view is if you have oversight on the bureaucrats and the public servants, then you can't have a situation where the only people that have got no overview are the politicians. politicians.
There does need to be something.
I think there will be pressure to have one, and I think it'd be better to have a bipartisan view about how you do it, and we should look at the weaknesses and the strengths of ICAC and make sure if there is one federally, it deals with the critiques and the criticisms that have been there of ICAC, but it shouldn't be a body that's got no teeth.
So you're open to the suggestion the Greens are now making about a federal body like this?
Look, there's been no discussion in the Labour Party on this to my knowledge. I don't think it's been to our shadow cabinet, or certainly hasn't been to the shadow ministry. But my view is that there will be pressure, and a federal government that looks after hundreds of billions of dollars, then I think there should be proper oversight.
Conchita Fierravanti-Wells?
I was going to say one of the issues, and going back to how all this evolved, and that's the relationship between lobbyists and members of parliament. I mean, we do have a national register of lobbyists. I think there is an issue there about in-house lobbyists that does need to be looked at some stage. And can I say that from a Liberal perspective, the Prime Minister's comments, and Rowan alluded to them earlier, one of the first things that Tony Abbott did when he became Prime Minister was basically to say that you can't be a lobbyist and sit on the executive, the state or the federal executive.
Which is
that's great.
It's a step. It's a step. And what about this idea of a federal body like ICAC? Is that a good idea?
Well, as Doug said, it hasn't been an issue that's been canvassed.
What do you think? I'm asking now, what do you think?
In terms of the Liberal Party, it's not been something that certainly I'm aware has been canvassed.
No, it hasn't. Do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I think that after the dust settles on some of the issues in New South Wales, and in particular after we see what Premier Baird is now going to do, I will not be surprised if there are additional calls for that, and it will probably need to be given some consideration.
All right, and Rowan Dean, I'm assuming you're not going to...
Dreadful idea. It would be a disaster. It's anti-democratic. In a democracy, the people are the people who oversee you politicians.
Oh, what a load of
not another body.
What a load of
the press and the people. We're capable of doing it. Don't worry. We've got our eyes on you. Don't worry. You don't need some other little body out there. Another kangaroo court out there.
How come you get a gig with the Financial Review? How come you get a gig with the Financial Review?
Because it's democratic.
If you're so naive.
Groupthink.
You're so naive.
Mate, I know you like everyone to have the same
opinion. Can I tell you, what I really like about this debate is that when it's the Labour Party in the dock in ICAC is fantastic. When it's the Liberals in the dock, all the right-wing commentators want its teeth pulled. It's
more
really,
importantly,
really
what
funny.
you like is all this focus on Barry O'Farrell, who ICAC say has done nothing wrong and is not corrupt, so that we're not discussing Eddie O'Beid, Ian MacDonald, and all of the Labor government that New South Wales had to put up with for a decade.
Offence. It's a criminal offence.
We get it, yes.
It's a criminal offence to lie to ICAC.
Exactly. And that's why we don't want an ICAC overseeing us, federal politicians.
Well, you would then not...
You don't want
because
federal politicians...
Because it doesn't work. For the simple reason it doesn't work. The baddies aren't going to prison and the good guys are getting nailed on both sides of politics. People are getting smeared. You were smeared, Doug. You were smeared in the newspapers because you appeared at ICAC. That was wrong. And it's wrong that O'Farrell's been smeared. It's not working properly.
All right, we've got to move on. We'll take a break. Back with more. Stick with us on The Nation. We're talking tonight to Liberal Senator Conchita Fierravanti-Wells, Rowan Dean, columnist with the Australian Financial Review, the New South Wales Secretary of the AMWU, Tim Ayres, and Labor frontbencher Doug Cameron. Let's turn to some of the budget speculation, because without the tumult in New South Wales this week, this is what we would be largely focused on. We're a few weeks out from the budget, and the case is being built by the government for changes to the age pension. Joe Hockey's certainly been doing that. Whether it's increasing the access age, changing the indexation rate so it's less generous, tightening the assets test, something's going to happen on this, despite Tony Abbott saying day before the election there would be no changes to the age pension. Doug Cameron, let me start with you on this. We have nonetheless seen spelled out from Treasury and others the trajectory that the age pension is on. We're all getting older, the population is ageing. We're going to have...
Some sooner than others.
We're going to have, by the middle of the century, a problem here, aren't we, if we don't change it?
Look, I think it's well overblown. I think if you look around the rest of the world, I think we're spending about 3% of GDP on these issues, and other countries spend about 7%. So there's lots of money that we could still spend looking after people. My view is we must look after those that can't look after themselves. And what we've argued in Labour for a long period of time is that those that can afford to look after themselves should. And that's why we said in health insurance, the cleaner that comes in and cleans up after us tonight shouldn't be subsidising my health fund. And that's what the Libs have said.
But getting back to the age pension, though, do you think it's fair that retirees who might have $1 million asset can still access a part pension or some pension?
That's the system we're in at the moment. That's the system that's been there for a long time. It may not be fair, but I think it's less fair to hand over, billions upon billions of dollars to millionaire women who become pregnant. Okay, I think you've got to get your priorities
I get
right.
that point, but just sticking with the age pension, though, the house, the family home being excluded from the assets test is a debating point here. What do you think on that?
I haven't got a view on that. That will have to be a view that's adopted by the party. There will be a budget reply speech. The issue here is, what are the government going to do? We're not the government. What are the government going to do? And what values, what principles are they going to put in place? Because their values and principles are skewed at the moment. And there's going to be an interesting test.
Senator, let me ask you then. Do you think the settings are fair at the moment when it comes to the age pension?
Look, good try. I'm certainly not going to speculate on what's in or what's out in relation to the budget. And there has been speculation, and it is just that speculation. We have been left in a very difficult financial circumstances. One only has to look at the MyEFO figures last year to see the cumulative deficits of $123 billion, and
so something
the debt
needs to be done.
That we have inherited from the other side. Now, yes, we've had a commission of audit that has reported, and we are considering that commission of audit, and at this point in time we are not going to speculate on what's in or out of the budget.
But I do want to discuss what people think are good ideas, where the fairness is and where the problems are in terms of the national budget. One of the other pieces of speculation this week, Laura Tingle in the Financial Review, Rowan Dean pointing out that there might be a temporary move to increase the Medicare levy even to get the budget, fix the budget in the first, for at least a few years anyway. How would you see that? It would be a tax increase.
Yeah, well, personally, the guiding principle, to answer Doug's question, what does the government do? The government's got to clean up the god-awful mess that was left by the last 6 years of a Labor government. So that's the first thing. $667 billion. So let's not underestimate the size of the problem.
Yes, that's right.
Now, there's a lot of things that need fixing, but the main thing is the biggest chunk is welfare. The age of entitlement, as Joe Hockey has said, we have to. It's not only Australia. All throughout Europe, the States, everyone has to look at the fact that welfare has grown and grown and grown, with nobody being prepared to say, okay, let's rein it back in. Not a big fan of things like temporary taxes and all the rest. Before we start taking more money off people, we should be recognising, let's stop the government spending so much and stop committing to things like Gonski and NDIS and paid parental leave and things that go on and on into the future. Committing vast sums of money that we don't have. Let's get our house in order.
Don't give people education.
And then let's not spend money we don't have.
Great idea, that, isn't it?
It's a good idea.
The Medicare levy. Just let me ask you about the Medicare levy, Tim.
Rowan's going to collide with reality and the facts. Put aside the Medicare levy.
No, let me ask you about that for a moment, because it is based on a progressive income tax scale, right? If you did increase that for a little while to try and help fix the budget, would that be a bad idea from the left's point of view?
What we've got to do is first of all, blow away this argument that there's a debt crisis in this country. It is absolute nonsense. The net debt to GDP ratio in Australia is much lower than most of our comparable countries.
Look, you can argue about that, but I think one thing you can't argue about is the case being made by the Treasury Secretary, the Reserve Bank boss and the rest about where we're heading. And where we're heading in the coming decades is a big problem.
There does need to be a mature debate in this country about making sure that we've got a tax base that can provide the services that people in the community expect.
Yep.
And one-off measures, like an announcement about a one-off temporary increase to the Medicare levy, is not a substantial answer to that question. What we shouldn't do is fall for what the Liberal Party is preparing the country for, and that is cuts to expenditure in areas that are really going to hurt people. The idea that we're going to roll back the age pension...
So what is the answer?
Well, if
it's not a temporary tax
increase... the answer is not. For the people who my union represents, for cleaners, for childcare workers, for aged care workers, the idea that you're going to force those people to work through till they're 70, and Senator Fierravanti-Wells may not be speculating on these issues, but the Treasurer certainly is, the idea that we're going to put people through that pain over a manufactured budget crisis it should be reprehensible to most Australians.
So what is the answer then?
Well, the answer is we have to have first of all, we have to be realistic about the position that we're in. There is not a budget crisis. Even on the Treasury forecast, if nothing happens, no changes at all structurally, the budget will be in surplus early 2020. There's no crisis here for people to see.
I don't
but
think
what we
the
do
Labor
need to
Party
do
knows how to spell surplus.
if we're going to deal with the big changes that we need to make, the NDIS, Gonski, those big reforms, if we're going to have a strong public sector that looks after the interests of all of the people in this country, there is going to have to be a big debate about reshaping the tax system.
Let me ask you, just getting back on the age pension, what do you think the Prime Minister, then opposition leader, meant when he said there will be no change to the age pension?
Well, just what he said, there will be. And in fact, he has said that we will meet our commitment to pensioners.
So there will be no change ever?
Well, he has said we will meet our commitments to pensioners.
And that's what you
well,
understood
that's my
to
understanding. Mean? That's my understanding. He said that we will meet our commitment to the pensioners.
So no change.
And well, I understand those words to mean precisely what they mean.
Ever.
That's interesting.
All right. I think lost in a lot of this budget debate, while there's been focus on the age pension, is some of the benefits at the higher end of the income scale, superannuation, negative gearing as well. If you're going to, as Joe Hockey says, share the load around so everybody has to sacrifice something, you've got to look at those things, haven't you, Rowan?
Yeah, you do. But just to pick up on Tim's point, Tim had a long time to say one thing, which was we just want to take more tax off people. That's all you want to see, more tax, more tax, more tax, so that you can spend more of it. But the problem is you don't spend it well. You spend it really badly, and governments don't spend people's money well. So taking more money off people and spending it on unions and all the rest of it, and pink bats and all the rest of it. Yeah, exactly, pink bat, whatever it is, school halls, all the stuff you throw your money around on, it doesn't work, okay? It doesn't grow the economy. To grow the economy, we want to be giving people more of their own money, not less, giving them back their own money so they can be productive with it, so they can create jobs, employ people with it, not go running to the unions, but actually create wealth.
You're as silly as a two-bob watch tonight.
Yeah. Theoretical claptrap.
There is an argument.
You had your go, Tim. Now, all you said was, let's tax more. You had 5 minutes and all you said, let's tax more. Now, the reality is we have to look at getting government spending down. It's that simple. Australians know it.
It's not
now,
that
you
simple.
don't know it, but Australians know that they have to get government spending down, so government spends less but concentrates on the things that matter. And that's what's got to happen. And that means reducing
the bottom line here,
entitlements. And to your point about negative gearing, absolutely, yes, negative gearing has to be looked at. Absolutely, superannuation has to look at. Absolutely, pensions have to be looked at. All these things need to be looked at and brought under control, because when, for example, when the pensions were set up originally, it was not expected that people would live until their 80s and 90s, retire at 60. 19 years was the normal length of time after you retired to when you, on average, died. And now it's something like 30 years.
That's
now, who's paying for that? Of course, it's a good thing.
Can I say,
but society, who's paying for it? Who's going to pay for it?
I love these, latte drinking, economists for the Financial Review out there telling people they've got to work till they're 70. I mean, I'm a fitter by trade.
Yes.
Right? I could not physically work, and neither could most tradesmen work till they were 70.
And did I just say that?
Physically,
no, I didn't just say
it
that.
just would not happen. So it's not a simple issue that you extend the pension age. It's not a simple issue to say that we spend less. If China continues to decline, in terms of its GDP growth, then we'll all be saying, how can we find money to invest in the economy to keep people in jobs? So this is not simple. When I hear a right-wing columnist telling us that everything's simple, I just shake my head. You know, I'm thankfully you're not running the country.
Yeah,
But Doug,
exactly.
can you then explain, obviously, the thinking behind the Labor Party's change to the pension age going from 65 to 67 in between 2017 and 2023? So just on that,
Yeah,
I'd be interested to hear
we
your
said that
views.
there had to be some approach on that. We actually increased it, but we also said that you had to look at how you dealt with that. And you see, you guys are trying to get everyone off the disability support pension. And if you're going to work till you're 70, then there'll be more people on a disability support pension. Let's be clear about that. So that's another complication.
It's a good point, though. Why was it okay to increase it, the access age to 67 but not go any further?
Because what we did was say over a long period of time that people can get ready to do that. And we also
but you can do this.
You just
No one's saying you
contradicted
do this
yourself,
tomorrow.
Doug.
No, I
You
haven't.
just completely contradicted what you were saying 2 minutes earlier.
No, you have to take into account the people that can't work. And the point I'm making is on the disability support pension that's under huge attack by the coalition. You see that in all the debates that's there. So if there's no disability support pension and people are working till they're 70, what's a
But
country
do you
like
think
our
as
way
a,
of
as a
doing?
fitter you could work to 67?
Maybe not.
So why did Labor, why did you agree to this?
Well, I argued at the time that we had to make sure that there was some process in place if people were physically not capable of working, that they could be looked after, and that's called the disability support pension. Labor supported the disability support pension. The coalition are trying to rip it away.
All right, but just to follow this through, if you do keep the disability support pension in place, can't you then extend the pension age to 70?
I suppose you could, but the issue is clear that a lot of people can't work till they're 70. It's okay if you're writing columns. It's okay if you're writing columns for the Financial Review.
No one's saying fitters should work till they're 70. Senators can, and right-wing columnists can, and I'm sure you will. No one's saying fitters should, okay? Let's get that clear.
But I think we've got some agreement here.
People have to look at entitlements, tailor them to where they're needed.
You can actually go to the pension age to 70 if you keep the DSP.
No, well, I think
That's what Doug Cameron's just argued.
With it when
I said
Labor extended the
67.
age to 67.
No, you said to 70.
I disagree with it now. I said something very unfair about Rowan's contribution before, and I have to say his contribution hasn't improved since. So I'm gonna lay off him, I think.
Right. We might take another break. I want to turn to the Prime Minister's big announcement during the week, and that was the second airport for Sydney and Badgerys Creek. A lot of infrastructure and rail goodies that'll go along with that. But how is that going to transform things in Sydney and New South Wales? Stay with us. Let's turn to Badgerys Creek. The airport has been given the green light after decades of debate. The Prime Minister this week announced construction will begin in a couple of years. It'll probably take a decade to be fully operational. Doug Cameron is someone who hails from the Blue Mountains. What do you think of this second airport at Badgerys Creek?
Well, the decision's been made. Now what we have to look at is to make sure the infrastructure's in place. We need to make sure there's a rail system in place. And one of the things that hasn't been talked about, which should be looked at, is to make sure there's a big investment in the education system in Western Sydney. So that if you're bringing more people into Western Sydney, you're creating more jobs, as the theory goes, then there's good schools.
So if you tick all those boxes, though, you're OK with an airport?
I think we need to still see the EIS. I don't buy the argument that it's only 4,000 people that's lives are destroyed compared to, 50 or 60,000.
But there's been inquiry after inquiry.
Well, there's not really been an inquiry. There's not been a proper cost-benefit analysis. You remember that thing called a cost-benefit analysis? I wonder if we'll see one for Badgerys Creek.
But it hasn't been done for this either, is the point.
But the point I'm making is that we were told you have to do cost-benefit analysis for all these things.
Before
Do you
any
still agree?
infrastructure project.
Do you still agree about a cost-benefit analysis? That's all I'm asking.
Well, I think you'll find that the benefits to Western Sydney will be there.
So you just think it'll be there?
I do believe that.
I think there could be some benefits, but it all depends on
Well, from the infrastructure you've seen that the Prime Minister announced this week, and you'd know those roads, the Bringelly Road and Northern Road, are they the right projects?
they're not enough. We need a fast rail link.
From this new airport
I
to
think if you're going
the
to put
existing airport?
I think you should put it to the existing airport. I think you should also put it to Parramatta, and I think we should also look to other like Liverpool area as well. If you're going to do this, do it properly.
Yeah, just on that, do you agree on the train?
I think, well, certainly the rail component of it is a decision for the state government, and I'm sure that there will be probably other issues, and the new Premier will have something to say about that. I mean, let's not forget, this is not just about the airport. It's an economic plan for Western Sydney. It's, from a public spending perspective, $3.5 billion, of which $1 billion will be over the forward estimates, the 3.5 over the $10 billion. Over 10 years. So we are talking about 4,000 jobs initially in the construction phase, and then over time figures of 35,000 and then ultimately up to 60,000.
But that's all the positive stuff, but it does also mean a lot of planes coming over the people's heads in Western Sydney.
Well, we are talking about a greenfield site. We are talking about, as Minister Truss, who made the announcement the other day, indicated, we are talking planes today are a lot quieter than they used to be. But I'm sure that all these issues,
So why can't the people of the inner west just get used to it?
Yeah.
Well, the point that I'm making is that there will be a whole range of issues, whether it be curfews or a whole range of other issues, which I'm sure will be, as Minister Truss said, open for discussion.
Yeah, what do you think about that? If there's a curfew, as there is at Kingsford Smith, where between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. you can't fly, should there be the same at Badgerys Creek?
Look, we're not, it's premature to talk about curfews, and we're not mandating a curfew. The point that I'm making is that these will obviously be discussions to be had, balancing against full economic benefits of a new airport in Western Sydney.
Yeah, and I guess, Rowan, the problem here, and why Tony Abbott has said we're not mandating a curfew, is that this has been the big handbrake when it comes to aviation in Sydney. This curfew means that a lot of international airlines can't come into Sydney for a big chunk of the day.
Exactly. We want to be a major international global city. We are. That comes with the territory. Having airports, you go anywhere in the world. You know, you have airports. They're crucial to business within Sydney, both the airports. There shouldn't be a curfew in either of them, obviously. But, you know, that's politics. But more importantly, now that we have Mike Baird as our new Premier, he will be able to flog off all those electrical poles and wires and things, Doug, and we will have plenty of money in New South Wales to build all the infrastructure we want.
Lots of money in New South Wales,
It'll be a whole new world. We'll have gold-plated highways left, right and centre. Don't worry about it.
Might build
It'll be
some
terrific.
social housing, do you think? Do you think
Why
it might
not?
even
Yes,
build some social
exactly,
housing?
once we've sold off those ones around the rocks. Now, but more importantly, what is really terrific, and what we haven't talked about, is what Warren Mundine said, and he said two things. One, finally a Prime Minister with balls, to quote on his tweet, which is true. Finally, someone has made a decision about this thing. But more importantly, what Warren Mundine went on to talk about was the benefit to Indigenous Australians. Western Sydney, the western suburbs of Sydney, is the highest percentage of Indigenous Australians in Australia. Fantastic job opportunities for them, and that's what he's highlighted.
Western Sydney needs it needs investment, it needs jobs, it needs infrastructure. All of this has the potential to give it a shot in the arm, doesn't it?
Well, we've been on the record as a union and the union movement in New South Wales for some years now on this issue. There should be an airport in Western Sydney. Badgerys Creek is clearly the location that it should be in, but it needs to come with a proper jobs plan, and it needs to come with a proper infrastructure plan. And the Prime Minister's obsession
and an environmental plan.
And the Prime Minister's obsession with roads at the expense of rail, this quaint ideological sort of obsession, very hard to explain to ordinary people. We've got this disjointed position between the Commonwealth and the state governments, perhaps interrupted by the Premier's absence for a couple of days this week, is a real problem. The people of Western Sydney need certainty. They need to understand where the jobs are going to come from. 4,000 construction jobs is a flash in the pan. That will be gone very quickly. We need a plan to make sure that freight to the airport's dealt with properly, that there's a link between the airport and Sydney Airport, that there's a link between the airport and the city and the airport in Parramatta. All these things are important spending priorities, and the government needs to address them urgently.
And no doubt you'd like to see some really punishing enterprise bargaining agreements in there as well, just to make it really expensive for everybody.
Well, it'd make the project safe, it'd make the project be delivered on time.
And twice the prices
and
it costs anywhere else in the civilised world.
A high-quality project.
We've got just enough time left to talk about something I know you've all been itching to, and that's the visit of the royal couple. Doug Cameron, they were in your neck of the woods today. I don't think you were there.
I didn't get an invite. The Libs didn't invite me.
You would have been at the front of the crowd?
Probably not.
No,
probably not. I'm a Republican.
You were front of the crowd when the Queen visited. I did see you there.
I get pushed out by journalists, by the way. Now, look, these people are really big celebrities. They are huge celebrities.
Is that a lose?
I think so. Again, they're an anachronism, really. But they're, celebrities who are an anachronism, so that makes it even more interesting. So look, if I'd have been invited, I'd have gone. I'll probably be there next week in Parliament House because what do they say? A happy wife makes a happy life, and my wife's pretty keen to see them. And so I'll be there, but I simply be as celebrities, I think, not as some monarchical representative.
Well, Senator, do you agree that the reason thousands have turned out yesterday and today in Sydney and the Blue Mountains is just because they're celebrities?
Absolutely.
No, I don't think so. I think that people, the monarchy, the constitutional monarchy that we have, people understand that it has given us stability for many, many years. The Queen has been a feature of our government for a long, long time. And I mean, particularly now you're seeing the next generation of royals, and yes, the next generation of royals are popular. There probably is a celebrity factor attached to it, but that doesn't account. That doesn't account for what we're seeing. For example, the Fairfax poll yesterday, 51% in favour of us retaining a constitutional monarchy. And what was really interesting about that poll was the number of people. 28% only of young people believe that we should have a republic.
I found this quite amazing, that number, that there is, particularly amongst young Australians, so strong support for the status quo.
And can I say that 28%, that's even higher than the ALP vote in Western Australia that you've had, Doug. So I'd be something that I'd be very concerned about.
But this is Dame Fierravanti-Wells. It just doesn't ring too well.
I might say to you, don't laugh. I'm very proud of my knighthood from the Italian government. Thank you very much, from 20 years ago, because I worked very, very hard. So
Good.
But Connie makes a really important point. A lot of younger Australians, and particularly Australians from European backgrounds, don't have the anti-English chip on the shoulder that many of the left have. Our English heritage is dreadful, we shouldn't talk about it. People like kings and queens. People like monarchies, absolutely. Young people do. They don't have this terrible thing.
All the time.
Yes, they support it. Why do you think they're there? They support it.
It's the
They
barbecue
support the system.
Tim,
Absolutely.
you find they do.
They do.
Why do you think young people in particular run away from the idea of a republic so much?
Well, I think it is about celebrity. I think that if you poll people in the middle of a royal visit, then you'll get that kind of result. I think people... I certainly have thought differently about the royal family since I've watched Game of Thrones, I have to say. It makes you think differently about the institution of monarchy. But really, a couple have arrived here. She apparently has her own hairdresser who follows her around. It's an anachronism to most people. It's a quaint, out-of-date notion.
Interesting.
It is interesting. It's a fascination.
It will ultimately run its course, and the thing that will change it,
there's a natural fascination.
And every monarchist in the country knows that the moment that it's King Charles III, it will be a very different debate in this country.
I don't know. I used to agree with that, but I just don't know. I think there has been a shift in sentiment in Australia. You're seeing it in that poll and other polls like it as well.
Well, it's up to Republicans to make the argument.
They're failing to do
They're failing to make the argument.
You are incapable of making an argument that people buy.
It's an idea that time will come.
Yeah,
What,
I agree.
what, will it be elected or will it not be elected? You can't even decide that, and the reason is because if it's an elected, head of state, they'll be in front of ICAC in about 6 months' time. So, that's never going to be bored.
I've got a feeling that we're not going to fall for that old trick again.
But, well, I guess whether it's elected or appointed, the main argument is that it's...
People like stability, people like heritage, people like tradition.
The main argument for a Republican,
And they like
Rowan, is that
stability.
it's an Australian.
Yeah.
An Australian can grow up now to be a monarch of another country. Just ask Denmark. Now, any kid knows.
No,
that,
but I'm talking
I
about,
know.
I'm talking about
And
the
you
head of
think
our
that
state.
matters?
The head of our
You
state.
think that matters?
Well,
Younger people don't buy the
I do
argument.
think it matters.
Otherwise, look at the polls. They don't buy the argument.
Why can't an Australian grow up to be head of state?
Why can't we have a system that has served us well for 200 years?
But it hasn't served us well. And if you look at the history of Australia and you look at colonisation, I think there'd be plenty of people in Australia would say that the system of monarchy hasn't served us well. The Rum Court didn't serve us well. Getting rid of decent rights in this country hasn't served us well under a monarchy. Now, I think you have to go back and have a look at the history of this. It's an outdated anachronism. It is massively, grabbing in terms of the public. These are some of the biggest celebrities in the world.
What is outdated is your view of the monarchy. That's what's outdated. The new modern monarchy has evolved, and Australians like it.
The modern monarchy.
This will be a debate, I know, that will go on and on and on for a while.
Certainly will.
We'll have to wrap it up there, though. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Conchetta Fierravanti-Wells, Rowan Dean, Tim Ayres, Doug Cameron. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for your company as well tonight. We'll be back same time next week. See you then.